Hey guys, welcome to the show. We have a special guest for you today, but I believe they're having technical difficulties, so they're not on yet. But as soon as they come on, we'll bring them to the show. Um, we're gonna talk about the you know stuff that's happening in Texas and all over the country. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the show, guys. So before anything, please share, subscribe, and hit the like button and the rumble button, and leave your comments down below so we could engage during this show. Anyways, so as much of you guys know already, the Texas Drag Show. We're gonna talk about it a little bit. Then we're gonna go into other topics. But interesting part is it's not the kid's fault at this point. It's the parents' fault for taking their kids to these type of settings. And you know, at some point, I'm gonna say this: that if they want their kids to be exposed to that, that's fine. That's their prerogative. It's their kids. Um, but that's where it should end. Which means this should not be allowed to push that ideology upon others. So it's basically um, asking somebody, hey, it's basically trying to recruit somebody to join a religion, right? Uh, Telling somebody, hey, this is the religion, this is what we believe in, and blah, 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 blah. And we're going to try to recruit you to this religion. We just come and join us, for an event. Just come and see what it's all about and all that stuff. And when that happens, uh, people will be like, okay, I'll come and see if I like it or not. And fine, if you want it to be that way, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Be that way. That's your life. That's your you know belief. Um, and if you want your kids to be in the same religious atmosphere, sure, make LGBTQ religion. I guess I don't know. Um, as long as you don't have the opportunity or the right to push it down anybody else's throat, I could give a damn. I could care less. You want to ruin your kid's life with this? Do it. I'm not going to stop you. That's your mission in life to expose your kids to these kind of things. I'm not going to tell you how to raise your kids. I'm not going to say how to be a responsible parent. That's your job. That's your kid. Do what you want with your kids. So, if I'm gonna say, oh, look how they're raising their kids, that's not my business. To be honest with you, I don't care. Anybody that wants to raise their kid, let them raise their kid. It's not my place to tell them how to raise their kid and how to do the things that they want to do. So, but this was the
Give the rewards people love. They
sorry,
love
this
it. More
stupid
rewards,
commercials.
less
I
hassle.
swear,
Order today.
this is what happened. But this was it.
This is the Drag the Kids to Pride event at Mr. Mister's in Dallas's Oaklawn neighborhood. Organizers promoted it as a family-friendly drag show where kids danced with the performers.
Where the sign behind said it cannot
What
lick
came with
itself.
it were protests outside.
Some people are the victim of a kind society, and you know it.
I live in this community. I have for several years.
Daisy says she first saw a poster for this event near where she lives.
I don't believe that I should be seeing signs advertising for children to be dancing on stage with men in thongs and in inappropriate clothing and makeup.
The organizers say today was a family-friendly event with a safe environment separate from their normal operations. In a statement, they said, We believe everyone should have a space to celebrate who they are. Mr. Misters is a place where everyone is welcome to feel accepted, safe, and included.
I've been here like every night throughout the week.
AJ Cruz has worked at Mr. Misters for about 2 years now. He said today's event allows people to express themselves.
There was a lot less people drinking today, so that would make it more kid friendly just because there's so many people here. Everyone just came from all walks of life and, just enjoyed Pride.
Organizers said they've received threatening emails and phone calls from the protesters.
I do not in any way condone the behavior that these people are engaging in, but what drags me out here is it's kids now.
Dallas police said they went to the event and protest to assist with crowd control and cleared the scene once the event was over. In Dallas, I'm Jay Wallace.
So, as you can see, they call it a family-friendly event, and they said this was, less drinking because there's more people around. So I guess people are a little bit more drunk. So I guess this is how it is. If again, what that lady says, they are advertising for kids to join this. So this is where I have the issue. It's when they start bringing kids into the picture and they start saying we're advertising for the kids. So this is where it crosses the line when you start saying, "Oh, I'm advertising for kids to join these kind of stuff." So when you have that kind of setting, this is where the issue arises. Again, I don't have an issue with the parent making a decision to taking their children in there. That's the parents' decision, good or bad. It's not my decision, right? It's not my opinion. It's not my place to say that parent made a bad decision. Life eventually will make that decision for them. It's not my place to say. But when it turns into an advertisement, that's when I have the issue. When that ideology turns into a motion picture, or it turns into an advertisement, or a poster, or a textbook, and crap like that, this is where I have the issue. Is where my kid is gonna get exposed. I don't want my kids to get exposed to that kind of crap. My kids are where they need to be, where I put them, and this is not okay. I do not want my kids to be exposed to this kind of things, and this is what these people are doing. Give me 1 second, guys. My guest is actually emailing me, trying to figure out. So I guess he's having some technical difficulties, but we're going to figure it out, and we're going to try to get him on right now. But realistically, this is where the issue is. When it becomes an everybody thing. I don't want it to be an everybody thing. This is where we draw the line. This is why parents are pissed off. And this is why parents are protesting. Because if it was a private event where a handful of people went in there on their own, which is apparently they did, but then you're going to advocate and try to push that across people, this is where we have the issue. So guys, give me 1 second. Let me just get my guest on his way, and this will take just a minute, guys, just a minute. Here we go. All right, let's see if he's gonna be able to log into this real quick. Okay, so I just sent him the, let's see if we can figure this out real quick, guys. It shouldn't be a problem. But going back to the conversation, this happens during live sessions all the time. We'll have technical difficulties. There'll be some issues that we can't log in, we can't get in. So it happens. There's the beauty of having guests, and the the fun part of it is this. So, um, all right. Sorry, guys. I don't mean to be pausing, but I'm corresponding with my guest, trying to figure out if he can get the link to work. I believe the link works. Let me see. Yeah, the link works just fine. So, all right, he should be logging in soon. The reality of it is, all right, yeah, the reality is, guys, when these people set up these kind of shows, let them set it up. But this is what we've been having the issues for the past couple of years that us parents have been speaking out about, because it has leaked into the schools. The school system is now adopting this kind of garbage ideology. They bring drag queens into kindergarten, into elementary schools, and doing story times, drag story times, and all that. I don't want my kids to be exposed to kind of stuff. I don't want my child to be confused, as why is this guy dressing up as a woman and look like a clown? Because that's what drags are. I mean, they wear hideous clothes and outrageous makeup, and that's usually what clowns do, is wear outrageous clothes and outrageous makeup and funny makeup or whatever. They walk funny, they talk funny. So I don't want my kids to be exposed to that kind of crap, because they are sexualizing the children. When they say, "Oh, this is kid friendly." How is it kid friendly when you are stripping in front of the child, or dancing provocatively in front of a child? How is that kid friendly? Please tell me. If that's kid friendly, then every program on TV should be able to air that without any issues, and should not be rating any of these material that's coming on, right? So when that happens, I don't understand how is it kid friendly while it's not allowed on TV for regular programming, cable programming. How come that's not allowed? How come that type of dance is not allowed on regular cable news? Beats me, I swear. I don't understand. I don't get it. I do not understand how it's that kid friendly. But this is how they want to do it. This is how they've perceived it, and you got some people who yell and scream like a moron, as advocates, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna do gay rights, and we're gonna do LGBT." Everything's under LGBT now. So because they say LGBT, they gotta pass. That's just how it's gonna be. And no, that's not how it works. Sexualizing the kids does not get a pass because you put an LGBT before it. That's not how it works. I don't understand how people are trying to make this as, oh, because we said LGBT, so now it qualifies as an LGBT event. Oh, because LGBT just gets a pass on everything? Because they are the purest? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's right. So when these kind of things happen, of course parents are going to be pissed off. Of course, majority of the community is going to be pissed off, because now we're getting into the sexual content of the whole thing. So when you do these kind of things, crap will happen. So, it is what it is, guys. I don't know. I don't agree with it. I believe there's a reason they have age limits for certain type of content. When it comes down to movies, you have rated G, you have rated PG, you have rated PG-13, you have rated R, you have rated X. What crosses between R and X, PG-13, R and X? I don't know. So, guys, stay put. I'm gonna bring my guest over. We finally got the technicalities worked out. Frank, thanks for joining me, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me. Sorry about the technical issues, but
No worries, man. It happens. This is part of the live show. This is this is this is the beauty of the live show. But Frank, thank you for joining me. We've been back and forth, for the past week trying to set this up, and I'm happy that we were able to do it. Please tell the audience who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are now.
yeah, well, it's quite a story. My name's Frank McCormick. On Twitter, I originally went kind of under the pseudonym Chalkboard Heresy. I was a public school teacher for 12 years, and over time began to kind of write about some of what was going on from my perspective in the school system, particularly related to the what I refer to as indoctrination. And as things progressed, my school district wasn't too happy about it. They kind of pursued certain course with me that I then kind of reciprocated back in full force, kind of deciding at a certain point that, my fate was probably kind of set to be either terminated or forced out at some point. And so I decided to use the time I had to just expose as much as I could while I had that short window of time. And so since then, I've been I'm just continuing to talk about education and a little bit about politics too. As a history teacher, that's something I maintain an interest in and probably always will. And trying to work with parents, specifically locally. I do a lot of work with like local parent groups because it's where I live. It's my state, my home county, but also a little bit nationally here and there. Just trying to ultimately, my perspective is that if I can give some credibility to what parents are concerned about, what they're seeing in their schools, because one thing I noticed, this was about a year ago, that when parents were expressing their concerns about what they were seeing taught to their children, the first thing teachers would say is, "Oh, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not a teacher." And so I feel that now I can say, as someone who's, kind of served his time in that system for quite a while, over a decade, I can say, you know what, they're right on target. And schools and teachers are not being particularly honest with them. Or they're so used to kind of promoting a specific narrative that they don't even recognize it. I don't know what's worse or what's scarier, but
Yeah, I mean, can you provide an example while you were a teacher? Like, can you give us an example? Like, what were they asking you to do, or like the material they were asking you to promote or teach?
So it's funny. At the point I was at, I uncovered a lot through the FOIA process about what they were planning to do. And what I actually observed being uncovered was other teachers through kind of bringing their ideological viewpoint into the classroom. And so we didn't really necessarily have marching orders yet, but it was certainly coming down the line. They had started to promote this idea of culturally relevant education, which is ideological by nature. They were building this diversity and equity and inclusion department. And so I kind of caught this early in the cycle. And I think what's maybe a little bit more alarming is, it's one thing to get marching orders, but it's another thing when you see teachers kind of doing this of their own free will.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of described it as this kind of almost like a religious cult or an orthodoxy, that they felt this calling to bring their message to students. And it's sometimes not what people want to hear because it's a much harder issue to solve. They want to hear like, hey, it's coming from this one person and here's what we can do to stop it. And when you start to realize that it's coming kind of organically from a lot of teachers because they believe this. That's a lot harder of an issue to solve because, you know, I hear people say, well, we'll fire every single teacher. I'm like, you can't do that. That's not practical or realistic. So, yeah, it was. And I think specifically 2020 with George Floyd was the catalyst for a lot of specifically kind of this, whatever you want to call it, race essentialism, neo-racism, a very critical race theory, a very specific view of race and society that they were kind of promoting and pushing on students and us to a degree too.
Yeah. See, I'm an Iranian immigrant. I came here when I was 13 years old. I lived in California for 15 years.
Wow.
And I honestly did not know what racism was or what it meant, or, you know, that I honestly did not know what it was. What I knew was prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was a lot of prejudice. There was a lot of people prejudiced against different race, different ethnicities. Never looked at it as a race thing, because the word racist, it never derived out of the color of the skin. Historically,
Right.
Historically, racism was not about your skin. Racism was historically about your ethnicity. So the Jews and the Germans hated Jews, but you know they saw Jews as race, as a Judaism race. They didn't see them as an ethnicity or anything else. That's how they identified Jews. So you know, and if you look at the dictionary states the same thing. Dictionary states what race is and what racism is. You know, so but here it has evolved into this word, which at this point is meaningless, because anything happens that's racist. You know, gas prices go up, it's racist. So
well, it's funny because a lot of times, and I encountered this with my students, and that was something that kind of, you know, they were picking up on this stuff. They heard from teachers about racism. They learned it in school. So they kind of got this idea that anything and everything was racist, and they would make these accusations. A lot of times what they were talking about was prejudice or was stereotypes. And to me, my kind of classical understanding of racism is when you believe a particular race is inferior to another race.
Correct.
Or superior. That's Correct. What racism means. But believing, for example, that all white people, you know, can't dance, that's a stereotype, but that's not racist. It's nothing to say. I mean, you could make the argument that maybe if they say, well, they're inferior genetically, but that's not what people mean. These are stereotypes based on culture and behavior. And, you know, sometimes with stereotypes, you know, I taught in a community that was 80% Hispanic, maybe 15% black, and then like 1% white. So I would hear a lot of comments from students about, hey, as a white person, why do white people do this? Why do white people do that? I never interpreted it as racism. Sometimes they were ignorant stereotypes.
Right.
But there was also sometimes a grain of truth to it. You could kind of catch like, okay, like they have this idea they've had some limited interactions with white people. They've picked up on something that maybe has a kernel of truth, and we could explore that. But I never found it helpful I would never accuse the students of being racist or of having ill intentions. To me, it was always an opportunity to, you know, to learn, to ask questions and to say, what does this mean? Why do you think this? And you know, use humor. I think what concerns me now is a lot of students are coming to it from this idea that, you know, our society is fundamentally racist, and it's every ignorant comment, every stereotype comes from a place of hatred and animosity, and people are out to get them. And I live in a majority white town, and the amount of times that race comes up, I mean, it probably comes up less in this white community than it does in the primarily Hispanic community where I taught. It came up a lot more there, and I heard a lot more stuff there. So it's just, you know, it's that perceptive bias, though. It's just, I would tell my students, I say, I hate to disappoint you, but we don't talk about that much. We don't go around using racial slurs with each other. We don't, you know, that's just, it's just not true. And That's why they've had to change the word and the definition of racism. Well, then it's microaggression because they can't find it, so they say, well,
Right.
it's microaggressions, or it's
Oppression.
implicit, subtle bias, oppression. You're right, oppression through things that you wouldn't normally think. So they
Right.
just have to keep changing, expanding the word to fit this narrative,
Yeah.
and the cost is incredible social harm.
Of course, and so here's where I think this is where our education system fails miserably, is where they don't talk about culture at all. So as you said, you were a teacher to mostly Hispanic kids, and some black kids and some white kids, and they'll ask you, why do white people do this,
Right.
right? So you ask black kids or Hispanic, why do Hispanic kids do this, or why do black kids do this, right? Why do their comments like, why do black people like watermelon or fried
Sure.
chicken or hot sauce, right? They completely disregard the culture factor.
Oh,
This is the
absolutely.
culture they grew up with, right?
Yep.
So they historically, why do they like barbecue? Because historically, when slavery was happening, they were given the leftover meat, which was not really a good cut of meat. So what would they do is they will grill it, they will barbecue it, and that's how barbecue started. That's how smoking started. That's how everything started. It has a cultural background. It has nothing to do with race. Yeah, maybe the history of it was not the best history of all time. We understand that, but every culture has had some sort of tragedy throughout their history.
Of course.
That goes with Middle East, Asia, Europe, India, Africa, U.S., South Africa, North Africa. Everybody has had some sort of bad history. I don't think any country in the world currently that's anybody that's living in it has not had any bad history. You know what I mean? You go back and read about it. If you can find a country in this world that has not had a bad history of any kind, then I must be wrong, or I don't know or I don't know anything, basically. So,
Yeah, no, as a history teacher, I mean, you're absolutely right. And you're right. What did happen to black people was, the African slave trade to the Americas, there were certain things about it that were unique. It was slavery on a scale and of a particular type that had a unique historical character and was terrible. But as you've said, these are things that have happened to all groups at various points in time period, whether it's genocide or slavery or some sort. And I certainly think, black Americans obviously got a raw deal for a long period of time. But the question I always come back to is, where are we today and what do we do going forward? And we have a decision to make. We're either bound by the past, we're condemned to repeat it, we're condemned to kind of, hold on to that anger and make it the center of our lives, or at some point we have to move forward. And there's always a way to look at things too, historically. I mean, the other way to look at it is what an amazing story America is, in that there were no other country in the world had a slave population that was so distinctly separate. Yes, you had large slave populations in South America and stuff, but a lot of times they were intermingled, but you had this entrenched, institutionalized system of slavery, and the country went to war with itself to abolish it and continued to fight to give black people full citizenship.
yeah.
That's pretty amazing. People, sometimes I would hear from other teachers, they'd say, oh, well, Great Britain, abolished slavery before the United States did. Well, yeah, no cost to them. I mean, they just had to say, yeah, we abolished slavery. I mean, their colonies were gone. That the French could just abandon their colonies,
Right.
but it was woven into our fabric, and that's a really risky proposition when you have a slave populace living amongst you, and the amount of blood that was spilt to overturn that, to just pretend like that's of no consequence. That's of huge consequence. And a country that is fundamentally racist does not fight one of the bloodiest wars in history to overturn a system of racism.
And to follow on that, look, the many of the civilizations have gone through it. I mean, look at the Romans. They had
Sure.
slaves. Egyptians, many slaves, many slaves, right? Slavery doesn't mean that you get some other race to do the slavery for you. Slave is a slave. When you become a slave, it doesn't matter what color your skin is. Regardless of your skin color, you are a slave. Slavery, in fact, still exists in Africa,
Yep.
realistically speaking. But nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about what happened in Egypt during the Pharaoh time. Nobody wants to talk about Roman time. Nobody wants to talk about when Mongols, invaded the Middle East. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that there was an Armenian genocide, there was an Assyrian genocide. Nobody wants to talk about that because Turkey denies it, right? But it happened. But it's okay if they deny it. But do you see the Armenians? Do you see the Assyrians going after Turks that walking the streets? No. Do you see the Jews going after the Germans? No, because they moved on. They're like, this is a period of time that happened in the past. It was a bad time. We want to make history right. We want to make sure the history exists. We want to make sure the history is taught correctly, and we don't want history to be used as a tool or as a weapon for our future answer or our future generation. And that's the whole part of history. If that's the case, if we're going to continuously use history as a catalyst to get what we want, well, crap, man, I'm from the Persian Empire, dude. I want to take over the entire Europe. Persian Empire was that big.
Right. No, that's right. I mean, yeah, history has been weaponized to kind of advance certain political agendas and narratives. It's exploitative. It's wrong. It causes social harm, and they take. Look, are there certain prejudices or even racism that Black people may still experience today from people they encounter? Of course. But to kind of tie that back and make this comparison, use the historical weight of slavery to try to make the case that somehow things are not that much better. I mean, I've heard sometimes people like there've even been, political commentators and journalists who've said, in some ways things are worse than they were in the 60s. Like, no, not at all. That's crazy. And the fact that you would tell people that you would have young people believe that fills them with rage and sadness and animosity. And many of these people who are filled with this are oftentimes economically disadvantaged for a lot of reasons we could go into. Sometimes it's the political policies of the people that are pushing the racism narrative are the ones that have them in these current situations, so it becomes a scapegoat. But it's always very dangerous to take people that may occupy kind of a lower rung of society economically and fill them with hate and anger and resentment.
Yeah.
We've seen how that plays out. We saw, it happened to the Germans. The Germans were kind of the underdogs of Europe after World War I for a while. They felt like second-class citizens, and they were filled with rage and resentment and hate, and it boiled over. And, 2020, not the same comparison. But when we saw, people, rioters, protesters, and many of there were whites, but the majority of them were Black people who were very angry and filled with this kind of rage and anger and resentment, and they're targeting innocent people and they're burning down buildings, and you have government officials and people in the media saying, well, it's like the blood tax that we all have to pay. I mean,
Right.
what a dangerous way to think. Just as a historian, I know that type of thinking, where that gets you. It gets you to innocent people who have nothing to do with your situation, who play no part in your history, suffering because you're suffering, and it's been kind of tied back to this greater historical narrative. It's so dangerous. It's so bad. It's so toxic.
And it's sad because I know how propaganda works. I lived it when I lived in Iran. I used to see. I lived through the Iran-Iraq War for 8 years, so I knew how they were manipulating the people. Because the best weapon in propaganda is playing on people's emotions. Playing with people's emotions is the best weapon anybody in power can have. So if you remember what the Nazis used to do, what Hitler used to do, he used to play on the citizens' emotions for them to snitch on their neighbors. So they could snitch out, oh, my neighbor is a Jew, or, the Jew is hiding in this house, or, this is how they weaponize the people. They don't have to give them guns. They turn them into a huge informants, basically. The entire country turned into an informant country because of the feeling and the emotions they pumped into them. And this is exactly what I'm seeing now, is what's happening in our school system is they are manipulating the children by the way they're delivering the message. So, I don't know if do you remember the Loudoun County school board fights that we were having?
Sure.
I went up there, and I wasn't planning to go viral. I wasn't planning to get on TV or anything like that. And I wasn't planning to become a podcaster, to be honest with you. That was not my intention. I went on there truly because I saw the exposure my kids were about to get because of, Policy 84. They were trying to pass the pronoun policy and all that stuff. And regardless of what I said, which, they were trying to, make my kids oblige to this bullshit, excuse my language, bullshit pronoun policy where, I came out and said, you're going to do that? I'm going to make you call my kids king and queen. I'm going to have you call me master next time you address me. Because at this point, it's no longer a pronoun. It could be a noun. It could be an adjective. Doesn't matter anymore. Because, you could just come up with, whatever fairy tale thing you want to come up with. And, because I see it as the most dangerous tool to use. And they use it on kids because kids' minds are just like sponge. And they are full of emotions. The kids are so vulnerable that, any type of emotional thing that happens to them or it's shown to them, they grab it and they can't let it go because, now it becomes scarred in their brain. So, and I see it. I was like, this is terrible. I don't want this to be exposed. Then, I'm sure you saw like a couple of days ago the drag queen stuff in Texas,
Yeah.
And, I started the show with saying, I honestly, I don't care about the fact that the parents took their kids there because those parents made the decision to take the kids there. Fine. Those parents will see what's going to happen to those kids in the future. The future of those kids is going to be relevant to them later. And I can't be a hypocrite and say, hey, don't tell me what to do with my kids and me sitting here and tell them what to do with their kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whatever you want to do with your kids, it's your business. They're your kids, teach them however you want to teach them, take them whatever you want to take them, right? Where I have the problem is when it starts to get advertised, when it starts to get on posters, when it starts to get on TV, when it starts to get on, the school board meetings, oh, we need to bring drag queens to do story time. That's where I have the problem. You know what I mean? Because these are the damn parents who are advocating for these kind of crap to be pushed into the school system, right? And I see the deterioration of the school system because when I came into this country at age 13, I sat in an algebra class and I was bored. I didn't speak a word of English, but math, it's a universal language. I understand formula. I understand all the stuff. And I sat in algebra 2 class at 9th grade, and I was bored because I already knew all that stuff. I never opened up my math book during class because the only time I had to open it was to do my homework, and that's about it. Other than that, my book was brand new, never opened. And now I see that that's not even their primary care at this point. Their care is not math, it's not science, it's not literature, it's pronouns, it's gender identities, social skills, uh, uh, you know, no science, nothing that will advance these kids in the future. Everything has turned into identity. I'm sure you saw. I don't. You probably didn't really see that happening while you were teaching, but you, as you mentioned, you were seeing signs of it becoming a thing, not being actively taught. But now it's being taught. And when I see, you know, kids, black kids, Hispanic kids, right? These are the targeted minorities. These are the people they need to pander to, basically. These politicians and these people in power, because that's their voters, right?
Mhm.
These are the future voters. And explain this to me, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How is it that an immigrant comes to this country? I'm not talking about myself. Let's use an Indian or an Asian. How is it that they come to this country? Children are about 5, 6 years old. Within 20 years, 30 years, those kids have thrived beyond any child that was born here and they're fourth, fifth generation Americans. And those kids have not thrived. They're still in the same neighborhood. They are not in school system. They've fallen victim to the system itself, and they haven't been able to get out of that sinkhole. And those kids come in without even knowing how to speak English, and they pick out up and they become doctors, engineers, lawyers, whatnot, what have you. So, why is that happening? Why is that currently the state of this country?
Yeah, I observe that too. I would have, students that were, whether they were black or Hispanic or even white, being just crushed by like a Nigerian student who was learning English or a student from Palestine. And I think it's due to one factor. The most powerful social force in existence is culture. The most powerful. Culture is, we need to bring back that word. I took a little bit of anthropology close to a minor in college and developed really an interest in it. I thought anthropology, it's become kind of dominated by left-wing thought, but there are some really interesting, unique ideas. And one thing I like about anthropology is it looks and it treats culture with a lot of respect. This is a powerful force. And that force is so powerful that it can really shape individual behavior in ways that nothing else can. The social forces that push individuals to act and behave a certain way, that determine whether people stay married or don't get married or have children or don't have children, a lot of that boils down to culture. We are a tribal species, and we are hierarchical, and culture is kind of the behavioral patterns that emerge in kind of our different tribes. And not all cultures are equal. There are some cultures that produce great things in one area and others that produce better things in another area. And, I think sometimes some of the best things in history actually are when you have kind of cultural diffusion. You look at like, why did the Middle East and Europe and these areas have so much prosperity and medicine and technology? Well, one thing that obviously, there's cultural differences and ethics that play a role in that, philosophies, but also two cultural exchanges where, like the Europeans were able to learn a great deal from the Arabic people about, math and science and astronomy during the Crusades. But going back to my original point, I kind of went off on my history teacher tangent. It comes down to culture, and you can have, just as in like psychology, you can have like someone with a pathology has negative behavioral patterns that emerge and get reinforced, you can have the same that's what culture is. Culture is the learned behavioral patterns of a group.
Yeah.
So you can have negative kind of a social pathology emerge. And it's very hard to treat because culture becomes behavioral patterns. Now, it doesn't mean, I'm not one of those people that says black culture's bad or wrong. I mean, there's many things about every culture that have good things and negative things, but there are certain things in various cultures. I think, like in Black American culture, and I'm not. This isn't about Sometimes people say, "Well, are you blaming them? Look at their history." Oh, forget about blame. We're just talking about the world as it is. Here's some of the problems that they face: having children out of wedlock at a much higher rate. Okay, although other groups are now catching up to that, which is a concern.
Yeah.
The rate of single parent households. There's a lot of evident, correlation between that and income and life circumstances. So rather than dance around that issue and pretend that it doesn't exist, pretend that single parent households produce the same outcomes, which they don't, or pretend that having children out of wedlock is no different than having children in marriage, let's just be honest about it and say this is creating a problem. And I would even, now this is an anecdotal observation, but I would observe, like my Nigerian student, someone would look at him and say, well, he's black. I mean, African student.
Yeah.
But his culture was so different in priorities. He saw, and this wasn't just among black students. I saw this in a lot of students in kind of lower income, impoverished areas. This kind of poverty culture where they see school as an obstacle or as learning as something like inherently white. They get this idea that, well, that's white people read books. White people are about learning. I'm going to rebel against that. And to be authentic is to be part of the streets and gang culture and these things.
Yeah.
So there's so much kind of social dysfunction in many of these communities where we see that, many of these tragic stories that kids come from, and we say, well, why are they reading so far below grade level and math level? I think it's these kind of cultural and social dysfunctions that have emerged. And so if we're going to take a medical approach, let's diagnose it correctly, and let's focus on treatments that produce better outcomes. Telling those students that they're victims of oppression and racism, that microaggressions got them where they were, no.
Well, I mean, look, when I came here, I was poor. We were poor. We didn't have money. We didn't have nice things. My parents worked. My dad, didn't really have a high-paying job. They got paid minimum wage. We start our lives very, very basic. And as we grew older, my brother and I, we grew older. We learned how to survive through that hardship. And I finished high school in 3 years because I just hated school. Period. I was not a school guy. I was more hands-on. I like to use my hands. I went to college for about 2 years, and I was like, this is not for me.
Sure.
So I went to the workforce. I was doing the work thing for a while, and look who's still up.
Whoa! Hey, that's like my son. I had to go to another room.
Yeah.
Hey.
He's number 3. Okay, Nico, go upstairs, please. Go upstairs, please. I'm talking, Baba. I'm on TV.
but he wants to be famous.
Right.
I love that.
I got 4 kids.
That's great. You know what though? That's what's great about kids is they don't respect. They're just they bring life to situations where we need them. That's
absolutely. And me growing up in California, opened my eye. But I was all about workforce. I gained so much experience.
Sure.
I've done so many different things, and I'm a successful individual without a college education.
Right.
As soon as you need to have at least high school education at the minimum, because that will actually get you ready for what's going on in the real world.
Sure.
Now college, if it's for you or not, it's up in the air of who's going to successfully go through college or not, because again, there's a lot of people who went through college, they got the degree, and they're not even using the degree. They're doing completely something else than what they studied. But what I saw while living in California, while we were on welfare system for a short amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
and it became a trend for the people that I used to know. They stayed on the system. They gave up many opportunities so they don't give up that free money. And when I see this becoming a generational thing, I see a lot of people who are in low-income neighborhoods, 3-4 generations on welfare. They teach them how to be in that system. They teach them how to manipulate the system so they could stay on that system. So that become a blockade for them to succeed anyways. Because that guy who's like, why should I go work when my rate, where my rent is paid for, my food is paid for, and I gotta do nothing all day? I'll just go hustle a little bit, make some cash where I don't have to report it, and that way I don't lose my income.
It's one of those cases where, like, sometimes the cure or the treatment is worse than the disease.
Correct.
So no one wants to look. I won't go into some of the things my family went through, but I've been through situations where money was very tight, and and in other ways, we were very fortunate to sometimes, when we didn't have a place to stay, we'd have someone be able to step in as a family. So I get that, but at the same time, when you've kind of institutionalized these kind of welfare systems to create kind of a generational effect, that's problematic in its own way as well. And again, it's like we have to be able to have honest discussions and look at policies that are helping people and policies that are hurting people. And it doesn't mean you let people starve, but we've kind of have this pathological empathy in our society where, and I encounter this amongst a lot of teachers, like they didn't want to ever have to take a hard position that required them to kind of stay tough. So I'd say we'd be in a conversation about welfare, and I'd say, look, maybe we give out food you get like your food coupons, like SNAP or something, which was like supplemental nutrition. I said, maybe, I'll be okay with that. And I said, well, no, I want them to be able to buy their own food. And I'd say, oh, okay, so what, give them cash cards? I said, well, what if there's abuse? Well, I'd rather them abuse it and be able to get food. And I'd say, okay, well, what if we put limits on it? No, I'm not comfortable doing that. It's like, okay, is there anything like that? Is there any line for you? I mean, I'd say, what if they're buying liquor and cigarettes? Well, people deserve to be able to drink and smoke. Just because they're poor doesn't mean they shouldn't be. I said, no, actually, wait a second.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you are poor, you do have to sacrifice. Sometimes it does mean you don't get the food you want. We're not going to let you starve, but we're not going to create something that enables you to live in that life. It's like
you shouldn't be buying lobster every week.
It's like in learning theory, there's a certain degree of stress that too little stress, you don't have enough motivation to learn. And too much stress also hinders learning. So you have a moderate degree of stress. And it's not because we want people to suffer. We want people to do better. So if you're poor, if things are too hard, I agree. If your belly is empty all the time, you may not be able to focus in school. Consequently, if you are having every need taken care of for you, what need is there to better yourself? That's human motivation and desire. And one of the ironic things is, where I taught, and I would say this to people, they'd say, our kids are hungry, they're starving. I'd say the obesity rate in this city is 70%. What are you talking about? Teachers would say, oh, you can still be fat and starving. they're nutritionally starved. I'm like, you live in a different planet because you have no concept of what real suffering or real hardship is like. And I would talk to my students. A lot of my students were from either they were from Mexico or their families were from Mexico. And that was actually a point where I was able to get through to them. I would talk about it. Say, guys, this is not suffering as your parents may have known it. And they'd kind of go, yeah. And I'd say, you have opportunity here that your parents didn't have. You have to do something with it, though. So yeah, there's we're always concerned. I think we talk about these issues because it's not because we're racist or classist. It's just because we actually do, despite what kind of the narrative is, we actually do care. I wouldn't have taught in that community for as long as I did if I didn't care. Oh, but I want solutions that work. I want to see people do well and better for themselves.
And that's one other thing is that I think school systems should be a positive environment for children where you can motivate a child to be somebody, bring that courage out of them. You know what I mean? Like teach them what courage is, and get it out of them so they can actually experience when they actually experience that courage. So they're not scared of speaking about learning something, right? So I say this all the time. The current environment that we have now is people are discouraged. Even grown people, like adults, are discouraged. They're scared to speak. They're afraid to speak because they're afraid of the backlash they're gonna get. They're afraid of what people are gonna think about them. Like I have a full-time job. Mm-hmm. Besides, what I do here at nighttime, I have a full-time job. People know me at work. I'm very blunt. I don't hold back. I do mind my comments to a certain point. I do mind people's feelings to a certain point, but I don't mind BS.
I think you've earned. I mean, look, anyone who spends the first 13 years of their life growing up under an autocratic theocracy has the right to say things the way they are. I mean, you've earned that.
The best part is, at work, I had a white woman tell me that I'm racist. Okay, because of my politics, because of the way I think, because of the way I talk, and I said, I'm glad you use your white privilege to determine I'm a racist individual. From an Iranian perspective, who was not even allowed to speak their mind,
right?
To fear backlash or possible imprisonment or even worse. So thank you for pointing that out. I don't take it to the heart. I don't get upset. I don't get offended. I myself am equal opportunity offender. You offend me, I'll offend you back 10 times worse. So, but but that's how it should be. I like to conversate with the opposite side all the time, mm-hmm. But I don't disrespect people. Right. I don't bring in their education. Just because you have a college degree doesn't mean you're an intelligent individual. Just because you have a PhD doesn't mean that you're a smart individual.
So, sometimes it means the opposite.
Exactly, because look, and I'm sure you've seen this, is because a lot of people who go through a certain curriculum in their lifetime, they end up being they enter into a tunnel vision because that's the only category they're going to start studying. That's the only category they're going to start focusing. And this is why they're like, oh, this person is a subject matter expert in this field, and that's it. Can they wire an outlet box? Hell no, because they're so afraid of two wires that comes out of the outlet box. They think they're going to die if they get electrocuted. What they don't know is that 110 volts just tingles you. It doesn't kill you. Unless you're absolutely going to hold on to it for 15 minutes for that shock to go through your body and stop your heart. Yes. But a split second, it doesn't kill you.
Yeah. So some of the, I've said this before, but I mean, and I truly, truly mean it, that some of the dumbest people I ever met were in education. And that's because they weren't educated in the classical sense. They spent 4 years in college being indoctrinated into certain beliefs. They knew what to say and how to say it, but they had no ability to think critically.
Yeah.
They lacked certain basic competencies in real critical thinking, or in kind of rhetoric or basic understandings of history. They knew what to say about history,
Yeah.
but they couldn't actually practice history on their own. You'd give them a primary source, they wouldn't know what to do with it. So I think that some of what we're seeing, the backlash, is also against, you have these kind of classes of people that are overeducated and under-articulated, under critical thinkers. I mean, and then they're telling people how to live their lives and what they should believe, and because they're less an educated class and they're more an indoctrinated orthodoxy, kind of like the modern priesthood of secular progressive society. And so they say the tenets of their faith and they profess them and they celebrate their own virtue and their righteousness. But they're forming kind of this political theocracy that they want us all to live under, and people are getting tired of it. And I think the straw, where you see in Loudoun County and is representative of what's happening across the country, is parents are saying it's one thing for you to have your little religious cult where you can all belong to and circulate the same beliefs, but now you're using our schools, my schools that my tax dollars pay for, as an instrument to push your faith on my children.
Absolutely.
That's where I draw the line. And
I think most of the parents draw the line there.
Should.
And this is where I always said, it's not my place to tell a parent how to raise their kids.
Mm-hmm.
What I have a problem is when that parent comes and tells me that you should tell these to your kids and you should teach your kids these things that I'm teaching my kids. That's where I draw the line. And that's when they start pushing the schools to do the same thing because, they got hurt feelings or whatever. So, Frank, do you have any other thoughts before we end the program?
Well, I'll just say, I think that, for any parents that are watching or people that are concerned about this, we're in this for the long haul. This is not going away tomorrow or in a year or in 2 years. I mean, I see this as a decade-long fight.
Yes.
Teachers and school districts are digging their heels in. They're becoming more brazen. We ask them to pull back on the indoctrination. They're bringing in drag queens. It's like they're testing us.
Yeah.
This, the message I've been really trying to push is that this is the most critical fight of our lives.
Yes.
Because if they win this fight and they get to completely ideologically capture our schools and use them as complete instruments of conversion into their faith, that's it for us. They rob us of our children.
Absolutely.
And I've seen it happen. I've seen parents mourn their children as they have been kind of indoctrinated into this cult, and they start coming home from school and mom and dad are the bad guys, or they go to college and then they don't talk to their parents anymore. I mean, where else but a cult do you see that? And if we see this replicated in society enough, if we see this get baked in, and you bring in another social context, maybe an economic crisis, who knows what it could be. Could be another single incident that sparks a greater movement. Things can get really ugly, especially when you've had generation after generation being told you're oppressed, people are racist, you're, the underclass, these are the bad guys. People, at certain points when they get desperate enough or scared, like we saw in Germany, they will go looking for blood. And they'll go right where they've been pointed to. That's my fear.
living in California, that's what I used to see. You know, I used to believe that too. Uh, I think I used to be a liberal.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I was too. I was
You
part of
know,
the
and
orthodoxy, sure.
but again, at that point, I did not have kids. I was not married. I was single. Yes, I wanted free crap because I don't know what I was going in life. I was, of course, I wanted all the free stuff. And growing up around gang members all day and night. I lived in San Fernando Valley, so it was not, I had really rough spots over there. And uh, didn't have the best friends that to look up to. Uh, but I slowly transitioned out of that phase when I started working and I started getting on a career path. That's when my whole mentality started to shift. And and I think every kid has the opportunity to become something important in their lifetime. And does not have to. You do not have to be a millionaire or a billionaire to be impactful,
Mhm.
in my honest opinion. I think children have the ability to be an impact on themselves and on their surroundings by us giving them the good example of what society is, what humility is, and how people can thrive as a society to work together, regardless of skin color, regardless of ethnicity, background or whatever. And especially when they get to adulthood, when they get to high school age, and they're about to enter the real world. I think kids seek some sort of attention. They seek approval, right? Like as a high school kid, you always seeking approval. You try to be that popular kid. You try to be around that popular kid. But I believe we should. We can't really change that culture, but we should at least provide examples so people can actually look up to some people or have somebody as a mentor to put them in the right path. And unfortunately, that carriage is very small. And we need to add more carriages to this small movement because whether you go to a very liberal high school or you go to a very conservative high school or any, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter honestly where you go because the dumbest people came out of Harvard. you know, I think role model is very important. I think self challenge is the most important part.
Mhm.
Self challenge is, I believe, is the most important part, and skills is even more important. We push education constantly. I believe that's a good thing, but sometimes we have to push skills. A lot of people can benefit out of having some useful skills, other than just a degree. Like plumbing, electrician, welder. Those kind of things are also a way of life. Not everyone's going to be an engineer. Not everybody's going to be a doctor. Not everybody's going to be a lawyer. Not everybody wants to stay as a barista in Starbucks. You know, but some sort of a balance can actually turn the society around within a decade. Bringing back the old way of teaching, bringing back the old way of having kids being in home ec class or taking a shop class. Do they even exist anymore in high school? Is shop class still a thing?
I mean, we had it. It's under budgetary cuts. They're slowly phasing these things out. They want, look, college is a racket to it. It's subsidized by government money. They'll take it from whoever gives them the check. So
Yeah,
they're happy to take it. They'll come up with new degrees. Schools are incentivized to push kids into college, and it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible.
yeah,
And in some ways, I you know, I was fortunate in that I had a gifted mind in terms of certain things that played to my advantage, but I also could have ended up in another way. And if I you know, if my school really didn't have that type of jobs program, so I could see myself, gosh, if I wasn't able to write or to speak, I would have been in a lot of trouble because I would have just felt wrongfully so inferior and incompetent and been missing out on some very well-paying jobs that require a high degree of skill. I mean, people sometimes, you know, will praise me. Oh, you're such a great writer and speaker. I wish I could do that. And I'm like, I wish I could fix a car. I mean, I look at that, or I look at, you know, people that start their own businesses. You know, I don't have the first idea of where I would begin with that.
Yeah.
So, you know, society needs a diverse skill set.
Absolutely.
And we can't all be, you know, historians. I mean, God, if we're all historians, we're screwed. We're screwed. I admit I come from a very, in some ways, useless class of individuals. I mean, look, teachers, we need teachers, but you know, we need farmers more. We need, you know, they're the foundation, the building block. The only reason I can be a teacher in this kind of specialized class of society is because I am supported by all these other essential functions. And you have to have most teachers don't have the humility. They think they are so enlightened and so bright and that the world needs them. The world doesn't need you need them a lot more. And I hope that people never have to learn that lesson the hard way, because you lose these skilled essential professions and you become too dependent on foreign labor.
Yeah.
And it gets cut off. You're in a lot of trouble.
I mean, I believe teachers are also an important part of the society. Unfortunately, what's happening is the teachers are becoming the megaphone for the politicians.
Oh, sure, yeah. They're becoming ideological instruments. I mean,
exactly. I you know, when I went to school, the teacher just taught the curriculum and that was it. You know, I didn't even know my teacher's first name. I didn't know what my teacher did after school. We never asked them, you know, how their weekend went. You know, if we didn't really like the teacher, we tried to figure out how to prank the teacher. You know, that was that was our thing. You know, we didn't really care, you know, what happened after they went home, because our interaction with the teacher was, hey, the teacher goes onto the blackboard, you know, writes, you know, the topic of the day. He teaches us, you know, this is what we need to learn and blah 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 blah, and he goes his way, we go our way. You know, yes, one or two students made like very close connections with the teacher. I wasn't one of them. But in the realistic term, I think teachers are the most important people in a society, because they are tasked with teaching little kids how to be an adult when they get to that level. But slowly, teaching them math, teaching them science, teaching them history, but the correct way.
It's a double-edged sword. You know, you can be either, you know, teachers can be either some of the best people in society, or they can be kind of the worst, because they have power.
Absolutely.
And
but that's the thing. That's where we have the issue, the immunity part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Teach your curriculum and walk away. You know, you don't have to, you know, wave the rainbow flag while you're teaching math.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Do your job. Come in, teach, do your job, walk out. Yeah.
Exactly, just like any other job.
Just like any other job.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you.
No, it's great. I'm happy to join you again. You know, we got
absolutely, man. I mean,
it was a fun conversation, and you know, Paul Rossi and I are going to start doing up a little show.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was the teacher at Grace, New York. So, you know, you can come on, and we'd love to continue this conversation.
Yeah, I would actually, you know, I would love to get his contact information from you.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
And you know, I'll bring him on it. But yeah, I'm open to come on anytime, man.
Yeah, we were both teachers. He was private, I was public. We have very different stories, perspectives, but we also understand a lot. So yeah, I will be happy to get you his contact info. And
that'd be awesome.
Paul's a great guy. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So you guys can follow Frank on Twitter at CB. Is that hearsay or heresy?
Heresy.
Heresy. Sorry, man. Like my pronunciation.
No, it's fine. Everyone says I had the board. One of the people on the school boards when I was speaking out, they said,
Yeah.
"You and chalkboard hearsay." And I said, "Hearsay."
And you also have a Substack, correct? Chalkboard heresy.substack.com. Please go visit his site. Please follow him on Twitter. Guys, thank you very much for joining us today. Frank, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for joining me on this podcast. I think we should talk about this more.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think this is a one episode thing. I think this is going to continue going on as things progress in this great country, while bad people are trying to destroy it.
Absolutely.
With that, guys, thank you so much. Have a great night. We'll catch you guys later.